but it's also much more. It's the heart of the Arbonne that we all adore. Your friendly neighborhood comic book store.
Yes, now. Yes, we are back in the comic book store. This is Comic Stripped, your podcast that looks at the original source material. No, not Jesse's podcast. The actual source material, the comic books themselves, and compares and contrasts them to their adapted medium, television show or movie. In this particular case, we are looking at Term Life, which was adapted into a major motion picture with Vince Vaughn and Haley Steinfeld. So we will compare and contrast those. And I am not alone. I am joined by the ever saintly. He doesn't use some language. He uses no language, except for the written word, which comes to him from God. Ladies and gentlemen, Evan, good to his mother, Bevins. How do you do, sir?
Well, after an intro like that, I feel a lot of pressure now.
No, there's no pressure here. Anyway,
be a darn shame if I let something slip now.
It's a super blog team up, Evan Bevins. That's what's happening right now. The super blog team up, and we're celebrating what's the anniversary here? I know we're celebrating the anniversary of Image Comics. That's why we're doing this.
It's the 30th anniversary of Image Comics when they when Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Will Portacio, Jim Valentino, somebody else, I'm sure. Eric Larson. They left Marvel in the dust.
I was gonna say they infamously dropped their pants and waddled out the door, middle fingers high in the air.
Yeah, I don't think that's quite how it happened, but yeah, more or less.
That's the story I heard, at least.
Yeah, they said, "See you later, Marvel," and they started putting out some strange and offbeat superheroes, but that was only to get the ball rolling. And since then, Image has put out a whole lot of comics about superheroes, zombies, crime, aliens, all sorts of good stuff.
So the most successful in terms of licensing, adaptation, the most successful Image character, Spawn, you think?
Well, at least until The Walking Dead came along.
Oh, The Walking Dead was Image?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that tracks then. Gotcha. So first it was Spawn, and then it was The Walking Dead. And now The Walking Dead is the most successful Image thing ever. I don't have it up here. I can pull it up maybe while you chime in on this, but I feel like Image has been a major contributor to the adapted to television and film medium, like in terms of comic books. I know, everyone looks at Marvel. It's like, oh my, especially if you're one of these fancy pants directors out there, Roland Emmerichs and Martin Scorsese's of the world. There's like, oh my God, these Marvel movies. I feel like Image has them beat. Just no one has ever heard about or read any of these comic books, so they don't know that they're adapted into television and movies.
Yeah. I didn't know Term Life was a comic until you said, "Hey, how about this for the Super Blog team up?" I'm like, "Wait, really?" Yeah, and I mean, Image got stuff adapted pretty quick. I mean, you think about how long it took certain Marvel things to get to the screen. I mean, I don't have the timeline right in front of me, but I mean, Image had cartoons within a couple of years. I mean, Spawn got a movie a heck of a lot faster. I think Spawn beat Spider-Man to the theater by a couple of years, and X-Men. And
go ahead. Sorry.
They had a little bit longer publishing history.
So I have in front of me right now a list of television series and films based on Image comic publications, just in television. From 98 to 99, there was The Crow Stairway to Heaven for one season. Then there was Powers, which was 2 seasons. Wynonna Earp, which is 4 seasons and almost 50 episodes. Outcast, 2 seasons. Happy. So you and I, on a podcast we did a couple of weeks ago, I talked about how I've had to, because I'm cutting back on my podcasting, I've had to cut shows. There's shows I still wanted to do that never even made the schedule. Happy is one of them. I desperately wanted to review the Happy book and then talk about. I think the show has run for 2 seasons now.
I read the book. I could not bring myself to watch the show.
Fair enough. Deadly Class at one point was on the list. I was going to do that with Alexis. The Walking Dead, World Beyond, Jupiter's Legacy, which has been reviewed on this show and subsequently canceled. The Walking Dead, Fear of the Walking Dead, and then upcoming, actually, depending on when you're listening to this, is Paper Girls. And then they've got some stuff in development. Sam and Twitch, American Jesus. We've got the American Jesus. Whoa. Bad Religion.
Did you just skip over Witchblade?
I haven't gotten to it yet.
Oh, my bad.
I
thought we were going chronologically.
Okay, I'm going in the order that it says here on the Wikipedia page.
Ah, okay. Well, my mistake.
So I'm still in development. Don't rush me, man. And first of all, when I sing and dance, I don't expect to be interrupted, sir. I was going to ask you. You ever listen to Bad Religion?
Maybe.
Okay. I don't know how much into like punk rock you are, but anyway.
I'm sure I've heard something.
Sure. Fear Agent and Astro City. Those are all in development. Yes. Witchblade, which ran for 2 seasons. A whole bunch of Walking Dead again. There's a bunch of animated stuff. Not the least of which was The Max, Savage Dragon, Spawn, Battle Pope, Super Dinosaur, and then Invincible, which is currently on Amazon. And then live action films. All right, get ready for this. So this is for all the money. It's for all the money. See ya.
I'm buckling up in my seatbelt.
The Crow, Tank Girl, Spawn, Mystery Men, Bulletproof Monk, Wanted, which was on my list, by the way, Kick-Ass, Captain Battle, The Scribbler, which good luck finding the movie, Term Life, Officer Down, I Kill Giants, Random Acts of Violence, which is actually currently sitting on my shelf, The Last Days of American Crime, which sucked, and The Old Guard, which also sucked. So maybe now Marvel probably has more stuff out there than not, but I think I've just proven beyond a shadow of a doubt how much Image has contributed to the world of film and television adaptation.
Yeah, well, and a lot of the Image, even though there is sort of a shared Image, loosely shared superhero universe, the Image stuff isn't as interrelated. Mm-hmm. So, you don't have as much backstory to build. You can, kind of hone in on one particular story, and a lot of times with a pretty stable creative team, and go from there.
So, how big into Image were you back in the day? I mean, like you're a big comic book guy. I obviously read a lot of Marvel, a lot of Howard the Duck, a lot of Squirrel Girl. So, where did Image rank for you? How much of the Image stuff were you reading at your height of it?
Not a lot. I was excited, to have like a new comic book company universe that was, coming into being when I was reading it. But I love Todd McFarlane's Marvel stuff. I never quite made the jump to Spawn except for a couple of the crossovers. Now I did collect for a while The Max by your personal favorite artist, Sam Keith. And I, for some reason, developed an affinity for Bad Rock. Got the occasional Bad Rock from Youngblood comic. Bought a lot of the crossovers, but just here and there, I didn't really get into it. The one I missed the boat on until much later was Astro City, which is just beyond phenomenal.
Okay.
I got tired of hearing about how great Astro City was. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's just another comic book. And then I finally read it, and I'm like, oh, you guys didn't talk it up enough.
Okay.
So, but I mean, and then I did eventually, read the Walking Dead. I've read that. So, but that's the thing, I mean, you shouldn't have to read everything in Marvel and DC, but the interconnectedness of it, for somebody like me, I like to follow as much as I can. Image, you could just, if something, gets your attention, you can just jump in and read that one. Some of the superhero stuff crosses over, but, it all pretty much stands on its own. So you can kind of take it or leave it, and they can do these, standalone stories that, I mean, Marvel and DC could do, but Marvel and DC tend to fold everything into their universe. I mean, even Watchmen is now part of the DC universe proper somehow. Mm-hmm. But so, Image, I mean, the emphasis has always been on the creators having control of what they do, and they just kind of do what they want, but do it with a certain level of quality. I mean, I don't know the sales figures or anything, but in my mind, Image was always, the next one. Like, I mean, Marvel and DC are still the big two, but then Image is right there. And, Image does just any kind of genre that, that their creators are interested in and that they can find an audience for. They tell the stories they want to tell.
When I was reading comics in the mid to late 90s, more probably the early to mid 90s, I should say, probably like 89, 90 to 94, 95. I remember all of my nerdy comic book friends, they talked about Image like it was the hotness. Image Comics was sort of the independent, like the cool indie band of comics. If you were a true cool comic collector, which sounds like an oxymoron, but stay with me. If you were, if you wanted to be a hep cat, you read Image Comics, and then you were cooler than Jesus. I'm going to tell you that I was always cooler than Jesus. I didn't even read Image Comics because it was too lame for me. But honestly, I think by the time Image Comics really caught on, I just wasn't really interested in reading comics anymore. But I remember like people were big into Savage Dragon. I watched the Spawn series, the HBO animated Spawn series on HBO, but I never read the comic. I remember a lot of my comic book artist friends in high school and a little bit of college. I think like Todd McFarlane just had this really weird influence on people because everyone was like copying his style. Everyone wanted to draw like Todd McFarlane, and I don't know why, because I didn't think he was that good. But what would you say was the big attraction to Image Comics back in the day? Why were they cooler than Jesus?
I think a lot of it was, the artists. The artists really dominated back then. I've always been more somebody who follows the writers, but I mean, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, it was very distinctive, and a lot different from some of the classic comic artists, and they were the guys who drove all the traffic. And then you could tell, even though they kind of rebelled against the Marvel business model. I mean, these were guys who had been Marvel fans who had worked for Marvel, so it was kind of like a new look at your favorite types of heroes or whatever. And like I said, I remember I was reading Jim Valentino, one of the founders, put out an Image timeline, and he talked about that they didn't just want to do superheroes, but that's kind of how they got a foothold. But that was, to me, was part of the attraction was, hey, here's all these awesome artists, and they're making new superheroes, and we can get in on the ground floor of this. And then Image just kind of became about telling the stories they wanted to tell or whatever. I mean, it's all over the place what the genre is, but the artists were the big draw at that point, and you had the hottest artists, the best of the best, turning loose their creativity and making these characters that looked like the stuff you like, but were a little bit different.
All right, so let's get into Term Life here. Term Life was written by A.J. Lieberman. It was colored, inked, and penciled by Nick Thornborough, lettered by Brandon DeStefano, and the editor on this is listed as Jade Dodge. Who are these people, and what do they do?
Well, the writer writes the story.
Nope. Try again.
Oh, no, I'm actually not familiar with a lot of these folks' work. I mean, this is the first thing that I really noticed with them.
Okay. So
I may have seen stuff. I'm finding all the time when I go back and look at comics I read in the past that, oh, that guy, like I mentioned, Bad Rock and Company was drawn by Todd Knock, one of my favorite artists. I don't know, 5-6 years before I realized who Todd Knock was and really started following him.
So A.J. Lieberman, credited as the writer on this, some claims to fame. He wrote Batman Gothic. He wrote 24 issues of Batman Gotham Knights, 13 issues of Harley Quinn from looks like the New 52, I think.
Okay.
Cowboy Ninja Viking, Martian Manhunter, 8 issues of that. Harvest. He couple appearances in Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, Batman War Games,
I've read Batman War Games, so I'm sure I have read some of his stuff, and just
he's actually written a lot of different Batman. The Silver Six, Harley Quinn, Vengeance Unlimited, Deep Soul. He wrote the Clayface, Batman Arkham. Take 3. Batman Arkham, Clayface. He wrote that, and then Graveyard Wars. So that's AJ Lieberman.
Okay, now, hey, I'm contributing. I'm looking up Nick Thornborough. He's actually done a lot of work in video games.
Okay,
he has done some comics, but a lot of his stuff. He's been a concept artist for Dragon Age Inquisition, Dragon Age 2, Sonic Chronicles, The Dark Brotherhood. So yeah, that's a lot of his work that I just found on his resume, so to speak there. And then of course, obviously he did Term Life.
Mm-hmm.
And what else? I'm trying to check this out, but yeah, I guess he's as much known for his comics. I mean, for his video games as comics.
All right. So the plot to the graphic. We're gonna start with the graphic novel here, and then we'll slide into the movie. If Nick Barrow can stay alive for 21 days, he'll die happy. Everyone Nick knows wants him dead, like you do. Mob bosses, contract killers, and dirty cops. Performing the last act of a desperate man, Nick takes out $1 million insurance policy on himself, payable to his estranged daughter. The problem, the policy doesn't take effect for 21 days. Nick knows they'll be lucky to be alive for 21 hours. You give a tip for a lucrative heist to the Russian mob, but then 4 of them die, including the son of the boss. If he could just stay alive for 21 days and protect his estranged daughter, he would accept his fate, which is death. Okay, so let's get into talking about this comic here. So as you saw from the plot synopsis, the whole deal is that he devises heists, and then he sells those heists to the highest bidder or whoever contracts him to do so. And if everything goes according to plan, he gets paid. He gets paid regardless. And he says at the beginning of the book, like, it's not up to me to execute the plan. It's up to me to devise the plan. That's what you're buying. And I will tell you what you'll need and how many people, yada, yada, yada.
Which is kind of cool. Sorry to interrupt you. That's like that's a side of the heist movies and the crime stories that we don't usually see. I mean, I'm thinking of like Ocean's 11 and things like that, where they're like, hey, we know there's 4 guards that do this, this, and this, and you know they always have somebody feeding them the information, but you never see that guy. So I thought that was like a neat twist right off the bat. A different angle on what you're used to seeing.
I did too. I thought that was a really cool concept. Like, somebody has to figure out. Like, there's got to be smart people out there that think about. Give me an example. My friends and I decided we were going to rob a White Castle, and we determined early on that it was impossible. That besides bank vaults and places where they store precious heirlooms, White Castle is the most heavily fortified, heavily guarded fast food joint. Like. We decided the only way to rob a White Castle effectively was with 12 men in a helicopter. So, but we did. We spent one night. We were just eating there. We were sitting there eating belly bombers, and we were trying to figure out how to rob the place. We had no guns or experience, and we're a bunch of idiots. But just bear in mind, we also thought we could rob banks or we could rob fast food joints. The folly of youth. Anyway, so
this was last week, wasn't it?
This was when I was either in high school or college. So I remember my friends and I just kind of all sitting there, and the first thing we notice is that it's glass, like a bank, like a bank teller station. It's just glass, it's life after COVID. It's just glass everywhere with little slots that you can like talk through, and and then a bolted door. And we're like, okay. In order to rob this place, you would need to get through that door, which is bolted. So you'd need some heavy equipment. This went on and on and on. We actually somebody at some point. This is the point of the story. Somebody at some point got out a pen and paper, and we started writing everything that we were going to need to rob this White Castle in Massapequa, Long Island, outside of the Sunrise Mall. Now imagine you did that for a living, but with a higher class of robbable places than fucking White Castle. Sorry, some language. So anyway, my point is, what a cool idea, right? because what if we couldn't figure it out? We could pay a guy to be like, tell us how to rob this White Castle, and there'd be a guy that does that for us. But the whole premise of the story is that somebody dies during one of the heists that he sold, and he's like, no money, I don't care if it doesn't go the way you wanted to. That's not my problem. And the Russian's like, yeah, we feel differently. And so he's like, well, I've been keeping tabs on my daughter, who's a teenager now, and I'm going to die more than likely. So I'll take out this insurance policy. They'll kill me and she'll be set for life. But as the plot synopsis said, he needs to last 3 weeks in order to do it. And the Russian mob is in hot pursuit. And oh, by the way, they're also now targeting his daughter because that's how mobs do. And when you put it out there like that, that's not a bad premise for a story.
Oh, it's a great premise.
It's a road picture. It's a father-daughter story. Like a lot of the father-daughter stuff in the book really resonated with me. This father feeling like I'm in a shitty business and I'm around shitty people, and that's not something I think a daughter should be raised in. I feel like she'd be better off without me, but I don't want to be completely without her, so I watch from afar. And the daughter's perspective is none of that is as bad as not having a dad. Okay.
And I thought it was interesting. She another reason she resents him is that her mom is a drug addict.
Yeah.
And she's going through all that. So it's not just, hey, I don't have a dad. At one point she confronts him and says, hey, you left me with her.
Yeah.
Which I thought, really, I mean, I've seen a lot of movies and stories where it's like, the parent is estranged and they're like, oh, that's kind of, pretty well trod ground. So it was neat to add that aspect of it in too.
Yeah, I actually, the book, I feel like at times is a little convoluted. I had a similar situation with like some of the Ed Brubaker and Stumptown and some of these other like crime noirs where I feel like the writers are just sort of compelled to present the material in a way that's offbeat from something that's done before, but in doing so, they kind of cock up the story. There's a pattern in a lot of comic books to try to overcomplicate things. And so Term Life is not a bad book, in my opinion. Like I said, there's some real meat on the bone in terms of the father-daughter dynamic. And there's a lot of the book is spent on them hashing out their differences. But in addition to that, there's also a lot of stuff with like the goons chasing him. And the goons are not that interesting. And we spend a lot of time with them for no good reason.
And the underlying scheme, not the heist that Nick planned, but what really happened, what went wrong, I found very confusing in the comic. And not to jump ahead, but the movie helped me understand the heist or the subplot in the comic a little better, because I didn't understand why these cops, the choir boys, I didn't understand why they were setting money on fire at the beginning.
Yeah, there was definitely parts of Term Life that I was kind of like, skip. It was just like the book is okay, especially if you're into crime stories. It's got a fun premise to it at least, but yeah, I don't think the execution sticks the landing.
Yeah, and I mean it does a lot of the disjointed storytelling. I mean, I know it's been close to 30 years now, so I guess we don't have to call it Pulp Fiction style anymore. But that's what immediately came to mind. Was it being out of order? I did think it pulled it together a little better in the fourth issue. Like some of the stuff I didn't understand came together, and you realize that there's maybe a wider stretch of time than you like. Some things are happening way after what we're watching that you thought were simultaneous, like the prosecutors that are trying to figure out how to bring these cops down. There's a thing where they keep having a ridiculous amount of Chinese food ordered,
right?
That I thought was, I'm like, what, did they just need to pad out some panels? Why are we focusing on the Chinese food? And that actually becomes part of the big reveal.
Yeah.
That it happened. So some of that stuff you were watching early that you thought was just kind of for exposition on the cops is actually part of the big reveal and twist. So, but yeah, it was kind of hard to follow. I thought it came together a little better toward the end.
We should probably, before we move on to the movie, I definitely want to talk about the father-daughter dynamic. You know, the father is driven by, he knows the mob is after him. He knows the mob will go after her. He has to protect her, and and it's so tropey now because everyone does this. Everyone says the same thing. Movies and television. It's like, I was doing it to protect you. I had to keep you safe. Like, you have any control over, you have any control over the vast, almost infinite amount of variables there are in life. The hubris on the way that Hollywood writers write lead characters now, it drives me a little insane because I don't know how many real people would actually say something like that and believe it. But it's the major source of their conflict because he's like essentially reduces her to, like a handbag. Like, he's just something that's like he's just carrying around and trying to keep safe. It's the ring of doom. Like, is it secret? Is it safe? And she's like, no, I am a whole person. And where have you been? And you can't talk to me that way. And he's just like, oh my God, there's bigger things afoot here. Like, the mob is trying to kill us. And she's like, the mob schmob, kill schmill. You need to talk nice to me. And it's like, I don't want to sound like I'm calling her twatty, but there's some interesting stuff with the daughter vis-a-vis the treatment of her by our lead character here.
Yeah. And you're right. The idea of the estranged parent coming back in to save the day is very tropey, and like we were talking about, the disjointed crime story is pretty tropey. But where I think this work was, it kind of combined the two into something that maybe wasn't totally new, but it had some kind of fresh and interesting moments. I really liked a lot of the father-daughter stuff, although the one that almost took me out of it is where I think it's established that she's 13, and he's like, well, that guy you slept with, he wasn't good enough for you. And I'm like, really? You're worried that the guy she slept with when she was 13 is kind of a jerk? I do wonder, just because I deal with a lot of like parents in certain situations, having been a social worker for nigh on 20 some odd years, and I do wonder like how much people think they can actually control about other people. There's certainly that belief out there. Husbands think they can control wives. Wives think they can control humans. Fathers, or husbands. Parents think they can control their children. And it's like, to an extent, maybe, but ultimately, if somebody wants to go and do something and they're not going to, and either it's a lack of consequential thinking or it's something else, you really have so very little control over what people do. But people in Hollywood and people who write comic books would have you believe that if someone just like, I'm trying to protect you, like somehow that works and like that's effective and anyone would care, and that's why, like, it's not that I didn't like Term Life. I liked it just fine. Always people are very concerned about what it is I like or don't like, despite my criticisms. I was entertained by the book. It's not the world's greatest comic I've ever seen, but not every, as Chris Sheehan says, not everything has to be either a 1 or a 10. There could be some 5s in there. This is a solid 5. It's okay. My last thing, and then I'll concede the floor to you, and we can wrap this up and move on to the book, going to the movie. Later on initially they have the father and the daughter have such a contentious relationship. And it was a little hard to read at times because, again, she comes across a bit twatty. But he's not much better. He's given lines and behaviors that seem so forced and so like cookie cutter. Like, I think the thing that, going back to what made Image special, was it was creator driven as opposed to Marvel and DC, which was editorial driven. If I remember correctly. Correct me. Yeah.
Okay. It's like, I'm going to do this comic. I'm going to do it my way, and I'm not going to have notes from the editor. And so clearly Term Life was somebody's passion project. Somebody thought this was a good idea. So I don't want to be like it was note laden and, it comes, and say that it comes across as inauthentic. I think it was very authentic. I'm just kind of questioning the level of not competency, but the level of talent involved in this book. There was a conversation that took place in our group chat for all of us American whammy people. And because we're no longer the Radulich and Broadcasting Network, be clear about that.
Hey, don't press your luck, man. Whammy. Okay, never mind. Go ahead.
No.
You were saying.
Ooh, that's a bingo.
So, Loki.
Oh, wow.
I went to the full gamut there. Hang on. Thank you. There was a conversation that took place in our group chat the other day about there's a lot of professional writers in the arts right now, whether it be Hollywood or in comic books, and I don't know how many of them are super talented or invested in what they're doing. I think it's a lot of gig for hire writers, and they're doing the best job they can, but they don't have a level of insight as maybe a fan does, and so things come across as inauthentic or flat or empty. And Term Life is one of those books where it's fine. I'm probably being a little overcritical, but on the other hand, I don't feel like the people involved in this were particularly, golden age of comics or silver age of comics talented. But I'll give you the last word here.
Yeah, it's a great concept, and they put together two pretty familiar stories. A strange parent, coming of age child, out of order heist caper, and it doesn't feel like it becomes much more than that. It's like
it might coalesce, but it doesn't really like ascend in any way.
Yeah, it's just like you're like, okay, it's a coming of age estranged parent story, in with a dark crime caper, and that's it. It doesn't really become more than the sum of its parts, I guess. I mean, like as far as the cliche stuff, like the scene where he's telling her to clean up the bathroom. I mean, it almost felt like that was exasperated father, but he hasn't earned the right to be an exasperated father.
Yeah,
which I think was part of the point. But
in his defense, though, if you're being chased by the mob, you do wish people would get the point faster.
True. Now, I did like it did have some good dialogue, like where she's asking him all these questions about how he about why he's in this trouble. Like one thing I thought was interesting. It was maybe a little more subtle than some of it. Is she says, she saw him kill two people when the mob comes to get her, and she goes, have you ever killed anybody else? He's like, no, those were the first two guys that I killed. Well, in the first issue, we see him kill like 2 or 3 people just getting away. So it's him kind of. I think he did it more to shield her and protect her than he did to save face or whatever. So that was kind of a neat moment. And then as she's quizzing him on it, she's like, well, did you steal all their coke? What happened? And he goes, yes, I picked up the wrong bag at the airport. Now they want me dead. This is actually a Jerry Bruckheimer film.
Yeah, it is almost like self-effacing or critical of the genre, which I did like, for the same reason I like the Scream movies, some of them.
Yeah. But then, when it comes together in the 4th issue, I thought it really did improve, like where you have the misdirection where the dead cop's wife is meeting with the guy from Internal Affairs. Mm-hmm. And then it turns out it's Nick who was there an hour beforehand. It does pull off some of those reveals pretty well, and it kept the life insurance concept going to the end, which was probably a good segue for the movie.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about that. So the movie Term Life, 2016 American action drama film based on the graphic novel of the same name. It was directed by Peter Billingsley from a screenplay by A.J. Lieberman. So the writer of the comic wrote the screenplay for this. Which we were, we talked a week or so ago about, remaking or adapting from the novel Firestarter, and we had a long conversation about the art of adaptation and how you can't just storyboard every page. You have to have to be cut. So I do find it fascinating that AJ Lieberman wrote the screenplay, because I'm wondering what babies he decided to leave on the cutting room floor, what he decided to do as far as an adaptation, which we will talk about momentarily. But Peter Billingsley, some of the last things he did, looks like he was an actor in.
He was Ralphie in A Christmas Story.
Yeah, I'm trying to see.
And he was the guy that Jeff Bridges yelled at in Iron Man.
Yep, he was on Who's the Boss as an actor. It looks like he's done a lot of acting. So I'm curious to see what. Okay, so yeah, he was the director on Term Life. He was the director on Couples Retreat. That's what I was trying to figure out, what other stuff he directed. So it looks
like he's buddies with Jon Favreau, who's buddies with Vince Vaughn, and Favreau shows up in this.
So he was an actor for a good long time, and then he got into producing. He was a co-producer on Elf. He was a co-producer on Zathura, A Space Adventure, an executive producer on The Breakup, co-producer on Wild West Comedy Show, executive producer on Iron Man. So this is a guy who hasn't directed a lot of features. Big shock. But he knows people in Hollywood, and he knows where to get the money, and that's where he's valuable. He's valuable as a producer. He's somebody that can make the moisture happen and get projects from what?
Not a phrase with which I'm familiar.
I steal a lot from Family Guy. That will make the moisture. So he's somebody who can get the money together, and he can get these projects from concept to finished product. Looks like with fair ease, but I don't think he has a ton of creative talent. This was a similar argument that got made with the broad that runs Lucasfilm that everyone hates. Oh gosh, I'll look it up in a second. But Kathleen Kennedy, there it is. Kathleen Kennedy was a producer who worked for Lucasfilm, and she was good at what she did. But the minute she had to be kind of heading up a creative role, you may or may not know this enough, but Star Wars fell off a goddamn cliff, and they now can't move toys, and it's a very sad place to work. So
I liked The Last Jedi. Anyway.
So did I. Actually had that conversation with somebody the other day. I'm like, oh, tell me about your Star Wars. He was like, oh my God, Rise of Skywalker was great. Last Jedi sucked. I'm like, please get away from my desk. All right. So it's a little bit of preamble there. The film stars Vince Vaughn, who also produced the film, Haley Steinfeld, Jonathan Banks, Mike Epps, Jordy Mola, Shea Wiggum, William Levy, Tajiri P. Henson, who, why she got a name credit in this for the one scene she's in is beyond me. Annabeth Gish, and Terrence Howard. It was released April 29th in 2016, limited release, and then it was on video on demand from Focus World. And I think this currently holds a 0 Rotten Tomatoes score. What do you think about that?
I get it.
Okay, well said.
It does not live up to the promise of its premise.
Nick plans and sells heist to the highest bidder, but is forced to take his daughter, Kate, who he hasn't had a relationship with her whole life, on the lam when a job goes bad. Kate has to fend for herself because her mother, Lucy, is an alcoholic. Kate gives her father a hard time because his criminal activity has now disrupted her life. Nick is trying to connect the dots and hunt down who double-crossed him. With the aid of an elderly man, Harper, he gets inside the inside scoop and comes to the conclusion that it was an undercover officer, Captain Keenan, who is out to kill Nick. Yes, the cops are always corrupt. Don't you understand, Evan Bevins of the Screaming Boy podcast?
Terrence Howard wasn't. Terrence Howard was all right.
Yes, he was. Hey, I don't know how much MMA you follow, but did you notice Cain Velasquez was in this?
I did notice Cain Velasquez was in this. I do not follow MMA.
Okay, but you know who Cain Velasquez?
Except for Street Fighter 2. Does that count?
No.
Okay.
So you know Cain Velasquez from what? His appearance in the WWE, or just because you've heard his name before?
Didn't he get arrested a while back?
He just got arrested for shooting a pedophile.
Yeah. So yeah, that's probably it. And passing references on SportsCenter.
Sure, that's more of what I was getting at. In the meantime, Nick and Kate bond, and she has asked how he does his heist. Learn how to get out before you get in. Evaluate the security of a location, whether you have CCTV or the owner is the one that responds, and always make sure to have a workable exit plan. Kate
If
was
only you had seen this before that fateful night at White Castle.
Exactly. Kate was initially irritated that her father knows so much about her and has taken pictures of her throughout her life and has kept it in a box. But there's a man in a box. Enjoys the birthday gifts he gets for her. Taking her to the carnival and teaching her how to shoot. Keenan now needs to clean up his corrupt team, who is ratting him out to the internal affairs, and kills Detective Maddie and a hooker. I mean, I don't know about you, Evan Bevins, but when you have an opportunity to kill a hooker, you should take it. That's my advice. What do you think?
Are we talking in the Grand Theft Auto sense? So you don't have to pay for your health, boost, or?
I feel like you should answer that question in the manner you see fit. Anywho, hunted by mob bosses, contract killers, and dirty cops, he takes out a life insurance policy on himself to leave something for her. Nick educates Kate on how to separate and survive. In the meantime, Nick gets arrested by the local sheriff, responding to an APB, and the Spanish mob springs him out of jail to kill him, but Kate comes to the rescue. Kate and Nick argue, and Kate abandons Nick on the side of the road. Keenan abducts Kate and uses her as bait to try to get Nick in the shootout. Nick and Kate escape, even though Nick was unwilling to listen to Kate's plan. Kate executed a plan that got rid of Keenan, and evidence pointed to him for multiple murders and exonerated Nick. And Nick and Kate choose to live together and bond as father and daughter.
And forgot about the freaking life insurance policy.
Yeah.
Which was the whole point of the movie.
Yes, and the name of the goddamn feature. So what did you think of the movie overall?
Not overly impressed. I mean, especially with the caliber of cast. I mean, I don't. How does Terrence Howard get like 2 scenes? I don't know. I mean, well, first of all, let's address the elephant in the room. What is on Vince Vaughn's head? I was distracted the entire movie. I was like, what sort of artistic choice did you make? And you're like, yes, we're committing to this.
I mean, look, there's nothing wrong with having tousled hair.
It just looks so like I still haven't noticed the digitally erased mustache in Justice League. But I can't imagine any world where it's more distracting than, and I don't know if it's just because I've never seen Vince Vaughn. I don't know, but that's what I was watching. I mean, they picked a good cast for it. I'm glad they made Kate a little older. I mean, you've got, I didn't even know Annabeth Gish was in it until I was looking at something on IMDb. I mean, I remember her from the X-Files, and more importantly, Steel with Shaquille O'Neal. And I don't know. I mean, you've got Jon Favreau hanging out with his buddies. You've got the dude from Breaking Bad, and it's just like,
keep going. I'll be right back.
Okay. I mean, you basically got this phenomenal cast, and what is, I mean, as far as an elevator pitch, a great idea for a movie, and you turn them loose, and I guess they just thought, well, we're all here, and this is a great story, and that's all we got to do. I mean, it didn't bother me. We were talking about adaptation a while back. It didn't bother me that the mob was Mexican instead of Russian, And now I will say the movie explained what the cops were up to a lot better or more clearly than the comics. I was actually able to sort of figure out the some of the impetus for what was going on in the comic from that. But they really leaned into the father-daughter odd pairing and left a lot of the crime stuff out. The story was very linear. There were no flashbacks or misdirections as to what was going on, which is fine. Nothing wrong with a linear story, but that's one of the things that made the comic interesting and sort of elevated, what was at times kind of a mundane so-so story. So you lose that, But then you've got the great ticking clock concept of I've got to stay alive for 21 days so my daughter can get this life insurance policy. And then they're like, no, you know what? Let's have a happy ending. and I'm like, I'm watching it and I'm like, okay, I can see somebody going, hey, we got Vince Vaughn. We got this adorable up and coming star, Haley Steinfeld. Let's have a happy ending.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, well, so obviously whoever was writing this got some notes from the studio. I wonder who wrote it. Oh, the guy who came up with the idea in the first place?
Yeah, but
I don't get it.
Here's my guess. Talking about adaptations again. I think he probably wrote it word for word what was in the comic and then got studio notes back. Like, we're trying to sell this to an international audience. You can't have it end with Nick dying. We have Vince Vaughn in the lead. We're not killing Vince Vaughn. This isn't a Marvel movie.
Yeah, I could see, like I said, when I was watching it, I'm like, okay, I guess I can see somebody wanting to do that, but to me, it's not because it has to be exactly like the comic, but to me that just kind of undercuts the whole point of the movie. And then I mean, did they even? It's been a little while since I watched it. Did they even mention the life insurance policy again?
Not that I can recall. He has the one scene with Jerry P. Henson, and then I feel like it was all about dealing with the corrupt cops.
Oh no, there is. I put the line down. I think what's his face from Breaking Bad goes, I think you got a better payout. Now that's schmaltzy even for me. I mean, I like happy endings. I like when people do the right thing, but that I'm like, oh, come on. I mean, I don't want to be like, oh, everybody involved in this did a terrible job. It's not that, but it's just, they had a good concept, and then they undercut that, and then they didn't really replace it with anything. They had an interesting elevator pitch, and they took that out, and then it just became like a lot of other movies with a likable cast that there's nothing really memorable about it.
There's been a lot of talk recently about like Bruce Willis movies that he was doing a lot. We actually reviewed one of them, Out of Time, where he made like
Out of Death,
yeah. He made dozens and dozens of these like low budget international features for whatever the reasons were. I think it just came out in the news like what the actual reason was.
Yeah.
But what got talked about was how obviously like low budget, low like lacking, like it was like C level, like not even B level, it was like C level feature. And that's how Term Life, like I think Term Life was meant to be bigger than it really was, but it just it comes across like one of those like cheaply made Bruce Willis movies. Like again, this is somewhat reflective of I think the comic book, because I just said this about that too. It seems like there's people who like heist movies, and there's people who identify with father-daughter issues. Like that should be a movie, but they are not good enough to actually write a good movie about it. They just write what they know from having watched movies themselves. So like Term Life feels almost like it's imitating one of those movies, like a better movie. It feels a little shallow.
You're not wrong. And I mean, I don't, I like me some simple, straightforward movies. I mean, I'm not opposed to something that challenges me and that is creative, but I mean, just like give me a fun and interesting movie. And this had a few moments, but nothing that really elevated it beyond the initial concept. And then not to sound like a broken record, but they tossed the concept. I mean, that's the Bruce Willis movies that we were talking about. Mm-hmm. The thing that got me to watch a couple of them was, okay, well, it's got a good concept, and they, I mean, even Out of Death wasn't great, but it had some building blocks there, and this did too, but it just, they didn't really do anything with it.
I think we talked before about like the actors that are doing the best job they can, and I think people who don't necessarily study film, they just sort of react to film, might oftentimes put the problem with a movie on the actors. Like the actors are just doing their job, and if there's not a director there to really pull performances up, because that is there are people on the film set that are in charge of making the film look good. The director is supposed to be sort of supervising things and getting performances out of the actors to reflect what it is that they're trying to do with this film. And I don't think this director, who is a producer, and Robert and I had a very similar conversation when we reviewed the 355, because that looked like another producer turned director deal. Because everybody wants to be a director, Evan Bevins. Everybody. You, me, Alexis Hana, Robert Winfrey, my son, Jonas, everybody wants to be a director, no matter what else they've done in their life, whether or not they have any talent for it. But the art of direction comes from the ability to know what it is you need from the actors and the ability to draw it out of them. And I don't think he knew how to do that. I think he just knew how to get a film made, and he's been on enough film sets that he thinks he knows how to direct. But, but saying to your director of photography, give me this kind of a shot here, and then sort of resting on your laurels going, well, we have Vince Vaughn. He's a good actor. I don't need to tell him really how to do his job. And Haley Steinfeld, she's an up-and-coming actress. She's cute as a button. She'll be fine. She'll be the plucky girl sidekick, and it'll be great. And we have all these other characters, and everyone can do their job, and he can just sort of figure out how to make it all look good. And that's sort of a dereliction of your duties as the director, because Vince Vaughn, yes, is a fine actor, still needs to be directed. If you just let Vince Vaughn do Vince Vaughn, it comes across like his character in this movie, where he doesn't sound believable, he doesn't sound authentic, he just sounds like Vince Vaughn doing dialogue, and then
with weird hair,
and then he's and then he's in some like shitty gunfights and shitty fist fights throughout the movie. And poor Haley Steinfeld is really struggling with this movie. Like, she's supposed to be playing this like earnest girl who's estranged from her father, and there's a lot of anger and frustration there. It's all the stuff that we talked about before. And I don't know how much better of a performance you could give if she had like a competent director. So I feel like I watched Term Life a couple of weeks ago in preparation for this, and I remember thinking at the time how it's kind of a nothing movie. It's professionally done and it looks okay, but I don't think beyond that there was a whole lot of care and effort put into it. I think it almost feels like this mentality of, we have all of these great actors and we have stuff that people like, people will just go see this without giving it any kind of thought beyond that.
Yeah, it just kind of feels like it sits there. I mean, the most memorable thing about it to me is, oh, hey, so and so was in it.
Yeah,
not what they did, just the fact that they were in it. It's got a lot of pieces, but they didn't really come together in anything very memorable.
Yeah, I was struggling. Like, I read the book. I watched the movie first, and then I read the book. And I was thinking, like, kind of like you, like, how did we get from the book to this? Like, it feels like a missing reel of footage. But also, I'm really surprised that the movie wasn't better than the original comic, because we have problems with the comic too. So here's your opportunity to correct those things and make sure you have a fully real life characters and a coherent story, which is all we want out of these movies. And I don't know why that's a hard thing to get, but that's a whole other podcast. So my final thing on this is, I really even though I saw that Term Life didn't have a high rating, I wanted it to be better, and I just thought maybe the critics are being snooty. Like, no, the critics nailed this one. This isn't that good. No, and either everyone feels like they're not good actors, and so they think they're doing good. It's like the people in the park, like posing as trees and stuff. Like, they think like you're fooling people, but you're really not. You look like idiots. So I think there's a lot of that. But anyway, I'll give you the final word here. Term Life, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of missed opportunity. I appreciated the comic a little more after watching the movie, whether it was because some stuff was explained better, or just that I was like, oh, okay, well, they did a better job with it by comparison. I mean, there's not an actor in there that I thought was like badly cast or not able to do what they had to do, but it just it had a lot of good ingredients and it just never really came together. I remember, like I said, I didn't realize this was based on a comic till you brought this up, but I remember hearing about this and I'm like, oh, that's a great idea for a movie. And then just Vince Vaughn and Haley Steinfeld. I'm like, okay, I didn't know who else was in there. I'm like, oh, okay, I'd like to watch them. And then it was just one of those that you didn't hear much about. It kind of got away from me. And when you suggested, I'm like, oh, cool, it's a comic. I've been wanting to see that movie anyway.
Yeah.
And it just, I mean, I went in predisposed to like it, and it wasn't. I've watched a lot worse, more painful movies, but it felt like it could have been a lot better.
We talked at the top of the show about the legacy of Image Comics and how they've affected the adaptation world. I think another thing that, especially if you look at that list of movies, that this is a company who they've obviously kept afloat in the lean years with all their licensing that they do, or they wouldn't do it. But then they're at the mercy of the studio. And so for them, they're like, well, clearly Hollywood is in 2019. There were like 20 movies that like hit $1 billion. It was like the highest earning year in the history of cinema. And then the next year, everything felt, life ended. We're still certainly digging out from that now. But I brought it up to say that I think that Image did all of this licensing because they thought, well, surely people in Hollywood know what they're doing. But if you go with that, you've got some fairly successful films that were Image licensees. Kick-Ass being a really good one, The Walking Dead, that sort of thing. But they have more term lives than they do Walking Deads. And that's kind of a shame because I feel like that tarnishes Image's legacy. But I'll give you the final word here and we'll start to get out.
I think term life, at least the comic is a good example of the variety that you get with Image.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's not, I do feel dumb not recognizing AJ Lieberman's name because I have read some of his DC stuff and things like that, but he's not a superstar.
Yeah.
So it's neat that you've got some guys in there who had a good idea for a story. Put a comic out. It's it's a straight up crime comic. There's nothing supernatural or super heroic about it. And it's just, they said, hey, this is a cool story. And some folks at Image said, okay, we'll publish it. So, it's a neat example of the scope of what Image has to offer. I think it's a fun read, not perfect, but definitely worthwhile reading. But you can probably skip the movie.
All right. Well, folks, that is our super blog team up. Everyone's doing such fancy Image stuff. I go, what's the most obscure thing I can find with a shitty movie? American Whammy. So yes, that is our comparison and review of Term Life, the book and the movie starring Vince Vaughn and Haley Steinfeld, currently of Hawkeye fame. As far as what else is going on, like I said, check out everyone's contributions to the Super Blog team up today. Evan, what are you doing? What did you do today for the Super Blog team up?
Well, I finally, after 30 years, got around to reading Spawn #1.
All right. How was it?
Yes. We'll peek behind the curtain. We're recording this a little in advance, so I'm still working on that.
Why did you?
Oh, sorry.
Just say it was good next time.
I'm sorry. I don't want to spoil it. I would like to let my writing speak for itself.
There you go, buddy.
That's what I meant.
Perfect. All right. Jesse dropped a source material today for Mad Balls. Check that out in the archives tonight. Jesse and I continue our long road through the David Simon television shows. We're on Homicide: Life on the Street season 6. This is only this. Check out our Homicide: Life on the Street season 5, which is where we started this journey. Yesterday,
did he do any Marvel stuff?
No, David Simon. No, sir. David Simon. Okay, yesterday we reviewed the new Firestarter. That's day and date on Peacock. The day before that, myself and David Wright did it on trial for Downton Abbey. To Thursday. This was a show that we were supposed to do at the end of April, but Alexis had stuff going on and I had stuff going on, so we delayed. We kicked it back a couple of weeks. We are now ready to review Upload season 2, and in the evening time, myself and David Wright will be reviewing Picard season 2 and trying to not tear our eyeballs out. And then on Saturday, I am going to some sort of burlesque show. What do you think about that, Evan Bevins? Like the old burlesque, huh?
Sounds exciting.
It is. It is. I do exciting and fun shit, Evan Bevins. You should hang out with me down here in Florida, and I'll take you to all the sex clubs and burlesque shows and nude beaches. Want to go to a nude beach?
I'll have to tell you about the time I was assigned to write a story about a swingers club that opened in town.
Please, can you tell that story now? Do we have to? Don't keep us in suspense, Evan Bevins.
No, it's actually not nearly as interesting as I made it sound.
God damn it! All right, and then Saturday. Speaking of Evan Bevins' sex club fetish, we'll be reviewing X, Red Rocket, and Boogie Nights. So we got that, and that takes us into Top Gun.
And by we, you mean someone other than me?
Yeah, by the royal we. So please be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, like and subscribe on all your favorite podcatchers, iTunes, Spotify. If you have an Alexa device, you can check us out on Amazon Music.
Cancel.
We're all over the place. We're American Whammy, formerly the W2M Network. And hey, I used to be the Radulich and Broadcasting Network. Now I'm Mark, American Whammy. Whammy. Have an American Sammy with your American Whammy. All right. And speaking of American Sammy Whammies, Evan Bevins, I hear you have a web comic of some description.
I do. It's called Support Group. It's about a support group for people with lame superpowers, in case your origin doesn't go the way they show it in the comics. I'm also, you can find my Superblog team-up contribution at *51.blogspot.com, where I'm also following along with the X Lives and X Deaths of Wolverine, which everybody else already finished a while ago, but I wasn't about to let that stop me from also rereading Secret Defenders and letting the people know that in addition to being the avatar of the Egyptian god of the moon, one time Moon Knight got stuck in a water tower.
Was it the Warner Brothers Water Tower with Yakko, Wacko, and Dot?
It was not. It was not, sadly. But if you go to *51.blogspot.com, you can find out just who else was in that water tower.
Oh boy. You can also check out Evan Bevins on a recent edition of On Trial. Evan defended Firestarter from 1984, I believe it was, with Drew Barrymore. I prosecuted it. We had a lovely conversation, and hey, I don't always lose trial, but I lost this one to Evan Bevins because he was touched by an angel and brought godliness into the courtroom. That's what he did, and that's why
I just invoked John Grisham.
All right. Anything else, Evan? If not, we're gonna get out of here.
No, I'm good.
All right, folks. Thank you. Check out everybody's contributions, including Evan's, on the Superblog team up. We'll be retweeting them on YouTube, not YouTube, on Twitter today. So if you see #SPTU or Image Comics Anniversary or whatever, make sure you give it a like and a retweet and whatnot. And make sure you read Evan Bevins' stuff because he is like right there with Hemingway in terms of authorial authority. Authorial authority. You like that, huh?
I'm an old man and I've been to the sea.
Perfect. For Evan Bevins, I'm Mark Radulich. Be well, be safe, and behave.